see what's going on here. Says I'm live. Test. Says I'm live. Okay. Welcome back. Okay. What? Was? What? Sorry, one sec. I've got a couple computers. And so what's going on? Nope. No. CSS exercises is the repo. CD. Wait. Monkey interpreter. Dude, what? What's in CSS line? Right. Boom. Okay, let's see. So we're learning about the cascade. So, learning about the cascade right now. And we're working our way through the Odin Project. Because I never actually got around to learning fucking just the stuff you need to learn, the basics of web dev. Yeah. Okay, so let's review. Oh, no. What I learned before. Actually, you know what? Let's close this. I want to look at all my projects at the same time here. Put a little pouch in. Set a little timer. Pomo focus. Okay, we're schmoving. Okay, so we did grouping selectors yesterday. Yesterday I did, I think, just everything from here on until here. So this is what I want to do at the very least today. But let's see, the solution. What was this? Right, okay, this was easy. We were adding classes and IDs. So for 2 and 4, they had IDs. and every odd number 1, 1, 3, and 5 had the odd class, which had these similar properties, except 3 in particular had this. Adjust font size. Yeah, okay. And in the index HTML, element 3 had 2 classes, which we do by putting a space between those two, I guess. I mean, I did this yesterday, but we're learning. Okay, so that makes sense. Oh, this pouch is burning. It's awesome. And then here, what was going on here? Okay, this was a matter of there's 2 buttons with 2 different classes, and they had properties alike. So we denote when we're doing so the dot notation is for the classes, and then when we are grouping selectors together, right? Use dot notation and a comma, and then things that they have alike here, so that they both have the same font family, and the text is the same size. But then they have they are different classes, and by specifying the classes just themselves, we can add properties that only apply to that instead of both. So these are both, these are unique. So black background, white text, and then a yellow background, black text. And I guess black text is just implicit, so we don't have to. So yeah, that makes sense. And then 3 or 4. This is chaining selectors, and this is why I'm going through these, because I want to remind myself what that means. Okay. So here we've got classes with, these are different classes for the same image. And then we're saying, well, what was the actual task here? Make the element with the avatar and proportioned classes 300 pixels wide. So again, I think this is just a matter of, okay, so you don't put a space, you're chaining them like that, I guess. Just dot class, dot class. Not entirely sure. Okay, difference. Chaining selectors and grouping. Jesus, grouping selectors. When you group selectors, you apply the same style rules to multiple selectors. When you chain selectors, you apply style rules to an element that matches all of the chain selectors. Okay. So in the CSS, grouping is more, you would have to do it in the index HTML by, right? Because your class, or no. Okay, you're just taking the classes and applying something to both. Whereas here in your styles.css, when you're chaining them, you're saying for any elements that have both these classes, as opposed to saying apply these things to these 2 classes. For example, you're saying apply these to whatever, as long as, you know. So we're kind of just distorting images here by adjusting the width in the style. Okay, and then descendant combinator. This is, so in the index HTML, if you have divs, and within these divs you have other elements. These will, if you want these to inherit, the specifiers we give to this class, that's called descendant, using a descendant combinator, I suppose, I guess. And that's done by what? Space? Like, wasn't grouping done the same way? No, that was done with a comma. Descendant is just a space and a dot. Okay. Okay, so grouping is done with Grouping's done with dot class, comma dot class. Chaining is dot class. Descendant combination is dot class space dot class, whatever. I can work with that. I'll be right back. One pee. And having a massive swig of orange juice. One sec. Back. Okay. So, descendant no. We're doing Cascade. So I started reading this yesterday, but I guess I'll just start from the top. So. Okay, so IDs have the highest specificity. So this, right, this takes precedence, then class, and then type. Type would just be something like div, and then center, text align, center, which has lower precedence than if this were a class, which we do with dot whatever class name, and then that would have lower precedence than IDs, which would be like save button, something we just want to apply to one thing. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so here, these both are just class selectors. So they have the same precedence in that sense, but this div has two classes, so it has higher specificity. So what color would it be? So the subsection class says it's blue, which this has. But dot main dot list, oh, I see, is red. So here it would be red, right? But rule 2 is more specific because it's using more class selectors, 2 to 1. So it would be red. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Now let's change things a bit. Now this has an ID. This is the ID selector, so it would be blue. Alright, now we have an ID, class, next subsection, background yellow color. dot main dot. So rule, I haven't read this text here, but rule 2 I'm assuming applies because ID is the highest specificity. These both have the same because they're both IDs, but this is an ID and a class. So both rules have one ID, but rule 2 is a class selector in addition, so rule 2 is higher specificity, so it's going to be red. Where, okay, while the color red declaration would take precedence, the background color yellow, okay. Special symbols for the universal selector as well as combinators. Alright, so here we're chaining. So we're chaining classes here and doing descendant combination here. Chaining, but both rules have two classes and the combinator symbol itself. So chaining does not both. Rule 2 uses a type selector which has the lowest specificity, but rule 1 uses the universal selector which has no specificity. Okay, so no, okay, whatever. Okay, inheritance refers to certain CSS properties that when applied to an element are inherited by that element's descendants, even if we don't explicitly write a rule for those descendants. Typography-based properties like color, font size, font family are usually inherited while most other properties aren't. The exception to this is when directly targeting an element, as this always beats inheritance. So div ID parent, div class child. So the parent is color red dot child is color blue. Despite the parent element having a higher specificity with an ID, the child element would have the color blue, since that declaration directly targets it. Wall color. Thus, oh. I guess this makes sense. Okay. Okay, so we can look at what it looks like right now. Edit this, yes. Okay. I'm a div with okay, see, I don't really know what to do here. What? Okay, class paragraph. I'm just a paragraph with extra bold text. Para, small para are both black. The font, what the fuck? Okay, for example, the confirm button, we don't, like, I don't know what, but we're not supposed to edit the HTML. Interesting, okay. So font weight should be here because both these have it. Both of them are black. Small para is smaller. Okay, so right now the smaller paragraph is the same size as the larger paragraph. Para, small para. But then, okay, because para is last. That gets applied. What? Sorry, I need to cheat a little here. So if we just get rid of okay, so now these apply to both. These apply to both because they're both class selectors. This is higher specificity. Whatever, so yeah. Then you're saying for para is that big, small para is that big. Whereas if you put small para first, para would be the most recent and they'd both be 22 pixels. It would be the latest. Okay. Now to figure out why the confirm button is shitting its pants. So button. Okay, it's just because these are IDs, I think, not classes. Like if we just did this, what happens? That button, never mind. Confirm. Okay, confirm and button both have well, I guess I'll just work through the break here and have another break after. Because I've got to figure this out. ID confirm. And then cancel. That looks good. Because otherwise, button, confirm. The confirm will get these because button's after. Right. Button cancels look good. Now, what do we need to do with I'm a div with thin text? I'm a div with thin text and a child div. Those look the same. I'm a smaller child div with extra bold text. Text child. What happens if we put this last? nothing. Div class text. It's black text, da da da, font weight 100. And then dot child. What if we get rid of this div crap? Yeah, okay, there you go. That was really annoying, but I guess it's just, if you got two things with the same thing, give one an ID, or use its, if it has an ID and a class, use its ID. If you've got conflicting things, make sure that if you need something different, that it goes last. Alright, that's okay. That didn't feel great, but that's done. Write CSS Foundations solution 406. Git push. Oh, one second. No. Okay. And then I guess I'll just take a peek through. Moved it from same thing. Yeah, okay. Done with that. Do another short break here because I didn't actually. Between a rule that uses one class selector and a rule that uses 3 type selectors, which rule has a higher specificity? Just one class. I'll take a run through this maybe. That was a cool website. But I'll do that on my actual break. Now to look at my phone. Okay, so right now this phone. Alright, to see if my friends are playing video games, then I can go do that instead of... No. Typical. So, mark this section as complete. Inspecting HTML and CSS. Okay, so once I finish CSS foundations, there's one more big section on other shit until I finally get to JavaScript. Which, I mean, youch. I really just want to be here. But I bet plenty of people rush through the learning CSS stage of things. But, you know, done professionally, right? Like how sorry. Okay. Alright, let's take a run through this. Just a bit more information on the cascade. So we know this. I think I'll do just this one more block. Or no, well, I'll go through at least. We'll see where we're at time-wise by the end of this. Because I need to go and... yeah, I should walk around and stretch my legs. Okay, now this is dumb. Stay focused. I don't really know what this is. Rule A has 2 hits on the 4th level. 1 class. What? Okay. What? Mm-hmm. Positioning and layout. Changing fonts and colors is a crucial skill. Being able to put things exactly where you want them. I mean, it's not that difficult once you understand just a few key concepts, unfortunately. What do we got here? Right. Padding, border, and margin. Padding increases the space between the border of a box and the content. Padding, border, margin. Space between this text and the edge of the box is padding. Purple line.
I knew I was underwater. I just didn't realize I was this underwater. If you're stressed about your paper, just...
In today's video, I'm going to be covering every part of the box model so that you can easily understand how to position elements using width, padding, border, and margin in CSS. Let's get started now. To get started, I just have two boxes off to the side here with the text 1 and 2, and background colors of red and blue. These boxes are represented in the CSS as box 1 and box 2. I've also removed all padding and margin from the page, so their boxes are pushed right to the corners of the page. And to get started explaining the box model in CSS is to understand that everything in CSS is a box of either a rectangular shape or a square shape. And it doesn't matter what you have in CSS, it's a box. Whether it's text, a button, a div, a span, every single element in CSS is a box. And these boxes have different parts. You have the actual content of the box, which in our case is this text 1 and this text 2. You have the padding of the box, and then you have the border and the margin. And we're going to go through all these different sections and how they interact to form the box model. So the easiest thing to understand is the actual content of the box. If you do nothing to a box at all, the content of the box is just going to fill up the space inside of the box, and the box will be no larger than the content. But if you start adding different things to the box, then you can start to expand the size of your box. So for example, one of the easiest ways to make your box bigger is to use padding. So let's add padding to this element. We'll just add 20 pixels to box 1. And if we say that, you see that our box is increased by 20 pixels on all sides. Everything is pushed away from this one text by 20 pixels. And that is because padding occurs inside of the background of the element. It occurs inside the border essentially, and it goes around the content of the element. So the content is the very most inside thing in the box model. And then we have padding next, which will include the background color of an element. So most of the buttons in CSS are styled using padding, so the background of the button becomes wider than the actual text of the button itself. The next thing we can talk about is the border of an element. So if we change this border size here to also be 20 pixels, it's going to be a nice purple color. We can see we get this nice purple border that goes around the padding of our element. So we have our 20 pixels of padding around our content, and then we have 20 pixels of border around the padding, which is around our content. And the very last thing that we could have on our element is margin. So if we just add 20 pixels of margin to our element, you can see that is spacing on the outside of our border, and margin is what we usually use to space two elements apart from each other. Padding is mostly used to add background to an element to make it go around the content, and margin is specifically to go around two different items to make them space apart from each other. So now let's change these values so we can see the difference between them. So we'll just make them all completely different. If we say that, you see that we now get this element here. And if we right click on this and go down to inspect, we can see the different styles. So if we click on this computer tab, we can see using the Chrome DevTools all the different sections of the box model. This rectangle right here is the box model. And on the inside, this blue section, this is the actual content of our box. As you can see, it's the thing that surrounds the one. When we highlight it, you can see that it is just the very intersection content of our box. We can specify distinct sizes of our content using the height and width property. So if we set a height here of 100 pixels and we set a width of 100 pixels, you can see that we now have a 100 by 100 square, and this blue section is that 100 by 100. Next, we have padding, which is this greenish color that you can see. And as you can see, it's 10 pixels that goes directly around the word 1. You can see it just barely touches it. So this is just around the content. And it also goes outside of the height and width that we defined. Next is that purple border, which we can see by hovering over here, and it's around the padding, as I've said. And then lastly, this margin, which goes around the element itself on the outside of the border, and it's used to break apart two elements from each other. So now let's do a similar thing to box number 2. We'll actually just copy all this code down to box number 2. We'll paste it here, we'll remove the margin for now, and we'll save that, and we see that our box number 2 is showing up right here. And now if we add a margin of 60 pixels to this box, you would think that the box would end up moving down because it needs to move 60 pixels further away from box 1. But if we save that, you see that it doesn't actually move further away, and that this 60 pixel margin is the same between these two elements. There's only 60 pixels here and not 120 like you would expect. And that's because in the box model, margin actually collapses between two elements that are next to each other. So since these elements are right next to each other and they both share a margin, whichever margin is the largest is the one that will be used. So if we change this to 70, for example, they now have 70 pixels of margin between them. And even if we decrease this down to 0, you can see that it still has that 70 pixels of margin between them. But if we make this 100, it now has 100 between these two elements. And you can see that by just hovering over here, we see that 100 margin. And if we select box 2, it has that 70 margin, but only 30 more between here and here because this is a 100 margin between the elements. Another thing to note is that if we hover over box 1 here, you can see down in the bottom left, it says that the height and width is 180 by 180, but we actually defined our height and width to be 100 by 100. And that's because by default in the box model, we get the height element, it adds together the height, plus it adds together the padding on the top and bottom. So in our case, 10 on the top, 10 on the bottom would be 20. So we're at 120. Does the same thing with the border on the top and bottom. So we have 30 top bottom, which would make it 60. So now we're at 180 right here. And that's how we get 180 as the height. Margin doesn't count into the height of an actual element for sizing using CSS by default. But if we wanted to change this so that our height and width right here are the actual height and width of our element, what we would need to use is we need to change the box sizing of our element to be border box. And what border box does is it makes this height and width account for the padding and the margin, or the padding and the border of our element. So let's change this border down to 20 pixels, so it's a little bit smaller. And if you save that, you see that if we go to our box number 1, our content section is only 40 by 40. In the other example, without this border box here, you can see it's the height and width 100 by 100. But when we use border box, the actual size of the content gets subtracted out from the border and the padding, so that when we hover over this, we see our actual element is 100 by 100. Instead of adding all these, it just uses this height and this width, and the border and padding just cut into that height and width. As you can see, our padding is still there and our border is still there, but the actual content of our element was shrunk down to be 40 by 40, so that the overall element, everything inside the border, is a total of 100 pixels instead of being 180. When it comes to learning the box model, the easiest way to do it is to use these Chrome DevTools, and you can see each of the different sections of your element, from the content, padding, border, and margin, and it even has a nice little diagram so you can easily tell what is what and what you're actually defining. But some good notes to take away is that if you want to space two elements away from each other, use margin. That is definitely the best way to do it using CSS. And if you want to space out an element from itself, you need to use padding, because padding is inside the border, which will include the background color, and margin is outside the border. And that's really all there is to the box model in CSS. One thing that you may notice is that we use this border box property, and this is something that is almost always used in CSS because it makes styling things so much easier. So many times this will get added to the universal selector so that every element will use border box, because it's so much easier when whatever you write as the height and width is the actual height and width of the element, and you don't have to worry about doing math in your head when you make these values. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this, and check out my other CSS related videos, which are going to be linked over here. Thank you guys very much for watching, and have a good day.
Everyone, the most difficult property in CSS is the box sizing property. So to explain the box sizing property, I have an example here. You often see this property used in CSS resets. So for example, you're gonna see this quite often where you select all elements and then you're gonna remove, for example, the margin, right? Margin 0, padding 0, and then we usually have a box sizing reset. So you have two options here. The default is actually called content box, and this often gets changed in the reset here to border box, right? So those are the two options that you have for box sizing.
I'm gonna go because I don't know if I can watch YouTube videos on stream.